Poiheads. Hello and welcome to this episode of Poiheads podcast. Today we are joined here by Jay Gilligan, juggler, juggling teacher, prop designer, and overall juggling aficionado. Welcome, Jay. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for talking to me. That's really fun that you started this podcast. And I saw the episode with Bo, of course. I'm a big fan of Bo and really love that conversation. And so I really appreciate that you invited me to talk to you.
Yeah, we are really excited to have you on. You are, of course, someone who have talked quite a lot on various podcasts and platforms and so on about many of your ideas. And definitely you have been a big inspiration also to me personally, as far as even starting a podcast in the first place, having also yourself done a podcast series together with Erik Åberg. We see that you are in what looks to be a hotel room right now, where you're at the moment.
Yeah, I'm in Oulu up north in Finland doing a week, 1 week of shows. I have a show called Another Sunset. I think I made that 3 years ago. I mean, Another Sunset is my juggling show that's about this idea of using different colors, which we can talk about later if you want. But it's slightly embarrassing that as an artist, I'm here talking about using different colors and that's a thing I have to mention. Because if I was a painter, you would just laugh at me, maybe like of course you're using different colors. I mean, this is a normal thing in different sorts of art fields, I think. With juggling, it's maybe not such a normal focus that we have. Again, there's like so many layers to jump in there. Yeah, it's my show confronting like juggling with different colors. Not that nobody's done that before, but it's still, I think, a pretty rare topic. The performances are for the general public, but also there's a thing in Finland, I think it's called art testers. I maybe have that wrong. But something like every 14-year-old in Finland gets to experience culture in some way, I think. And so half of the performances this week are for 14-year-old Finnish kids. Then they watch the show, and then after the show, there's a question and answer where they interview me about the show. It's quite an experience. I speak in English in the show. I rewrote the script because I knew I would meet Finnish teenagers, and all respect to them that they have English as some sort of second language and some capacity. But I edited a lot of the talking out and tried to make the show a bit more visual for them.
How visual are we talking? How much did you change it?
So the show Another Sunset, it's actually on my YouTube channel, the whole show. I also made an in-depth documentary about that project, which I'm really happy how that came out. It's on my YouTube channel. So you can see the whole show and you can see the whole idea behind the show and the evolution of how it was created. And I'd say the show I'm doing here is 50% different. I really tried to cut out at least half of the talking and then change those moments into something more, from juggling, from a visual side.
What about you, Rocco? Where you are at the moment? What have you been up to?
Still home, still editing like a madman, all the clips and the videos and stuff. Yeah, as I said last week, I'm just really excited to be going to some convention at the end of the month in northern Italy. It's going to be a small thing, but conventions are always my favorite thing in the juggling universe. I will still go to those even if I will stop juggling. I think I will try to find a way to just get in there and hang out with other jugglers and see some shows and stuff. So I'm really excited about the end of the month. Other than that, not much. Editing videos, playing video games, thinking about video that I want to edit. I have some idea for a new short video that I want to shoot still in my room. So let's see if I can pull it off. It's hard sometimes to get stuff out of your head and into reality with video. You want to make something easy and then you start just adding stuff on top of it and the scope keeps ballooning and then in the end you do nothing and you feel like an asshole because you did nothing and you're like, nice, I threw it away. So right now I'm in that phase of trying to keep everything under level and under control so that I can shoot whatever it's in my mind. Let's see if I can pull it off. I'll let you know. If in a couple of months there is still no video out, I failed and this is my proof. So that's what I've been up to.
It's on the record now.
Yeah. I said it. I will not edit this out. If you don't see this in the video, you can do something about it.
But I mean, we're recording this before this episode is going to be published. So you said in a couple of months if the video's not out. So you have at least 3 or 4 months, actually.
Yeah.
Safe bet.
Yeah, I got also a convention coming up. I got invited now to the British Juggling Convention for doing the gala show there. Like they call it introduction/gala show, something like this. I've actually never been, so pretty excited to go to British Juggling Convention for the first time. And you mentioned these, Jay, you mentioned that you were here and it's performing for Finnish teenagers and so it brings back a lot of memories for me. I did a circus tour also in Finland like 10 years ago, where we also went around to especially Swedish-speaking schools, and then it was mixed with both Swedish and Finnish-speaking. Both Swedish and Finnish are national languages in Finland. And then we traveled around and taught kids how to juggle, did shows for them and everything, and it was all in Swedish language. I'm not Swedish, but I speak Danish, and Danish is quite close to Swedish, so it's usually mutually intelligible with a little bit of practice, and so that's definitely bringing back some memories of Finnish teacher's room with just endless copious amounts of coffee and school cantinas and everything like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned before, Jay, here how you have been working on these, colors. It's of course something you have talked quite a lot about in various both TED Talks and podcasts, and seems to be really quite a fascination. You mentioned also how for painters it might seem obvious, but I'm reminded that there are still colors being invented nowadays with paint. There are still things being, there was the black is black and the pink is pink. And even before that, you have things like Prussian blue, who all of a sudden change how people can express themselves with painting, right?
I mean, certainly there's new colors, like the Vanta black and the pink is pink, and that whole little fun controversy of who can use what color and whatever. But I think more for me, it's just that the conversation is like in painting, for example, it's just been embedded in the culture for so long. Just the conversation about color. And again, to be fair, like in juggling, that conversation has also been around probably since beginning of juggling in some form, but there's just been no formalization of that discussion but I mean, it gets better all the time, don't get me wrong. It's always an evolution. Like I'm talking to Jacob from Cathedral's juggling. He makes rings and balls, and he's really into the color stuff. And now like Play Juggling, this last EJC, I didn't go, but I saw all the social media stuff, and then like Play has all the new colors of clubs and rings, and I think Henry's was finally doing colored handles for dolphins. But if we compare it to the sophistication of the exploration of color and other different art forms, we're just taking the first step. And of course, just to say that like juggling doesn't have to be like juggling has many different relationships to many different people. In this context now, this week I'm performing, so my relation to juggling is like it's my profession, but also I think it's an art form. I think I'm an artist and I'm expressing something with the juggling, but I fully understand that for other people it could be a sport or a hobby or an interest or a physical meditation or like many different things. So in terms of the area of art with juggling, I'm not surprised that it hasn't gone further than it is right now. But if you start to look around in the art world, it just has so far to go.
Juggling as it is now, it's also not that ancient as a whole, right? The community around juggling, the juggling manufacturers and everything, it's all quite small scale and doesn't have that deep historical foundation like painting, for example. But of course, more and more people are manufacturing now. It's becoming easier with 3D printing to do some things at home, with CNC machining becoming more available and so on. So I make my own knobs actually for Poi. I make these little things out of silicon. But even then I'm somewhat limited by the colors that the manufacturer of the silicon is putting available, right? I can mix them to some capacity, but mixing is not that easy. There is an art form to that too, to a certain extent.
100%, right? Yeah, and it's like, I always think about it, maybe I talked about this before in some other podcasts, but like there's 24 hours in a day, right? And you just can't get more hours in a day. So how are you going to choose to spend those 24 hours? And like, all respect to you that you made a mold, I guess, and like you made a mold for your knob and you're pouring in liquid silicone and it's, it's hardening into a knob that you can use on your Poi. And that you're also thinking about mixing color or attempting or you are doing it, but like you also recognize that, like you said, there's a there's a whole art form to that. For me, I think about those kinds of things and then I go, yeah, but of course, as a personal interest, I can learn how to mix silicone really well. But I want to juggle. Like I also have a bunch of stuff I need to go juggle. And I'm actually better at the juggling and going farther with the juggling than with the mixing the silicone. And it's always this negotiation between like ambition versus like kind of payoff of the, like your, if I use an ugly term, your ROI, return on investment of like your resources, which is such a dumb way to say it. Really quick, I had a funny story about that. You're talking about mixing silicone. I was working in a show in Paris with Michael Moschen, like in 2001 or something in La Courneuve, and Denis Pommier was there. And Denis Pommier he had some PVC pipe that he had bent into a juggling prop. They're really cool. It was kind of like a little circle on the bottom, and then it would come up as a stick. So you could juggle it like as a club, but it also had a ring element on it. But it's using PVC pipe from like a hardware store. And PVC pipe, you know, has like the printing on the side. Like it has like a black letters and numbers and barcodes and stuff.
Yeah.
And so Denis was talking to Michael, and Michael's like, oh yeah, like, you know, what do you like? That's a cool prop. Like, tell me about it. And Denis like, yeah, I bend it like this, and it's a little bit of shame. The writing's on there, and I would like to have them to be a different color. And Michael just looked at Denis and said, yeah, but don't you know how to paint PVC, obviously, because that's like part of Michael's process. And like in Michael's world, that takes a higher priority, right, than maybe some other aspects that Denis is prioritizing in terms of refining technique or pushing some sort of, you know, whatever side of the work that he's interested in. But Michael had obviously prioritized the how to paint plastic, which, by the way, you know, it's not straightforward. You don't just take a can of spray paint and do a primer and do a top coat. It's totally brutal to paint a PVC pipe and manipulate it and have the paint stay on there. But to Michael, that was like second nature. And it was kind of funny to see those two processes, like Denis' process and Michael's process, kind of meet in that moment and be like, oh, there's a spectrum here. And like, where do you fall on it? And how do you dedicate your time to whatever you want to try to do?
Yes, of course. Michael, as far as I can tell, is an extremely aesthetics focused person, right? Really focused on the visual aesthetics of the work that he is doing. I never really talked with him, but I have seen him perform on EJC and listened to his talk on EJC and so on. And of course, extremely inspiring person as a whole, and foundational to so many aspects of modern juggling, right? Taking juggling in a completely new direction that we are still benefiting from to this day. For example, he invented an S-staffs, and today we have bougangs of which people are doing, and it's a whole thing on its own, and it became, right? It develops into something completely different than what it originally was. And or contact juggling, modern forms of contact juggling, of course, also a huge thing, and seeing so much incorporation in regular ball juggling also nowadays. So yeah, definitely, if any of our listeners have not watched Michael's work, please do so. I cannot recommend it enough.
Just go watch the Triangle Act, do yourself a favor, and just watch that beauty. It's funny because like I'm just doom scrolling randomly, and I get from some random source of the internet, look what this guy can do with this huge triangle, and it's completely out of bound. It's almost pop culture. And for me, knowing like what's behind that act and seeing it so approachable, and like people just getting into it, like, wow, it's crazy that this person can do this thing with balls and the triangle. It's so simple and so direct, but at the same time, that act was a pure experimentation and pure like avant-garde for such a long time. People were just juggling with jester hats somewhere in the world. Then there was this guy going like, no, I will build a huge triangle, work with time and bouncing and sound and pantomime and make this thing. You do your thing, I will just do this because this is coming out of my brain right now and this is what I will do. And then 20, 30, 40 years later, you just see it scrolling randomly on your favorite app, and from not a juggling source, not the IJA or EJA, it was some huge outlet that shares a crazy viral video, and you see this thing and you're like, they will never even guess where this is coming from. It's part of human history. I love it. It's beautiful.
You're going to have to stop me from talking about Michael Moschen, but I have a story about...
Go for it.
If you don't stop me, I keep going forever. This is a really oversimplification of the process, but it's a really funny story, or it's like a really, I think, strong image that basically, Michael started off doing 3-balls, kind of like a 3-ball wizard, like master of like all the 3-ball tricks. He was kind of known as like this crazy great juggler. He could do everything with 3 balls, like really technical. So he was kind of climbing that technical ladder. I mean, he also had a club passing act with Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller. I mean, Michael could pass 10 clubs, which back, in the mid to late 70s, I mean, even today, it's still cool. 10 clubs, it's crazy, right? So
it's insane.
Back in the mid 70s, it's kind of unheard of. So he was climbing that technical ladder, and he was kind of playing that game of like upping the technique all the time. And then the Moscow Circus came to visit New York City, played Madison Square Gardens, and a mutual friend arranged to get Michael into the practice session when the Moscow Circus was training. And Sergei Ignatov, the juggler Sergei Ignatov, was with that tour. And of course, at the time, it was not straightforward that you could, like the Russian, American, the USSR back then, right? So it was very hard to get Michael into the training session. But they went into the circus ring, and it was Michael and Sergei took a chair. And I've heard this story from 3 different people. And they've all kind of said the same thing. So if it's true, I mean, I have 3 sources. I don't know. I wasn't there. But Sergei took a chair and he put it down in the middle of the circus ring and gestured Michael to sit on the chair because, they don't speak a common language, or they couldn't really communicate. But Sergei had heard from his friend that this is the great American juggler. Like, this is the American Sergei Ignatov. Like, kind of thing. Michael sits on the chair, and then Sergei stands about like 1 meter away, like too close. And when Michael tells the story, it's really like it's too close. And then Sergei does the 11 rings, like in front of Michael. And Michael said, like, that was the moment when Michael thought, like, wait, am I going to do 12 rings now? Is that the game? Like, now I have to do 12 rings? And like, I'm never going to do 12 rings. So what should I do? And he said, I should do 1 ball. Like, I'm going to do 1 ball. I'm going to stop this escalation of like the technical ladder, and I'm going to do the opposite. And that was kind of like, this is a very oversimplification of the whole journey, but like, it's a nice little idea into that start of that path of like, hey, I'm not going to do 12 rings to be better than Sergei, what am I going to do? Okay, I'll do the opposite and just start with 1 ball. And what can I do with that? And that was maybe the start of his journey to find different things, and the triangle eventually.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's the breaking of the numbers game, right? To always have this. How many can you do? I can do whatever, 7 balls. But can you do 8 balls? And you can always add 1 more, and it's a never-ending game, of course. And there is an interest there and a fascination with how much is sort of what's a human limit or what's a personal limit of how much can you reach. And I can completely understand this fascination of many people. But I also think there is a bit of a limit to how interesting it can be to always add 1 more from an artistic perspective. It becomes at a certain point a bit more of a technical challenge. The visual, of course, it's crazy, no doubt there. But as far as expression, it's like you could add a 12th ring, you could do 13 rings, maybe you could do 14 rings, and then you can imagine how that will look. Can you do it? It's maybe a different question. But if you come with 1 ball, you might be completely surprised as a juggler, right? Because we don't know what to expect with the 1 ball, but you kind of know what to expect if someone is going to juggle 14 rings.
So what you're talking about right there, to me, like I really haven't formulated my thoughts about technique yet. Like I've been thinking about it for 20 years, but I haven't really figured it out yet. But what you're talking about there's some aspect of what you were just saying is like, yeah, we can add the 12th, 13th, 14th ring, but we can kind of imagine what that is because it's along the path that we're already walking on. Mm-hmm. For me, technique is somehow relative to familiarity. So the 1 ball is like more, in one way, it's just less familiar to us as a juggler because that's not like in that traditional line of like 1 more, 1 more, 1 more. Then all of a sudden to take away, not even 3 balls, but 1, you know, it's not even like the starting point is usually 3. You're going to juggle the 3-ball cascade, right? Now we're going to go backwards and just do 1 ball. That kind of blows your mind in one way because we're just not very familiar with that situation. So another example of that is, I don't know, back in the day with Rudy Cardenas and whoever else, you know, bouncing 2 balls on your head, you start to look at old films of people performing, and quite a few people performed bouncing 2 balls on their head. These days, you don't hardly see anybody doing that trick. And I tried to do it, of course, and I couldn't get anywhere with it. To me, it was impossible. And then I'm thinking like, well, wait a second, this trick is impossible. Like, I mean, of course, there's a couple people doing it today, but it felt like it was more prevalent back in the day. It's like a zeitgeist, right? Like it's like a mental relationship to technique. And it comes down to like all the superlative numbers games we're doing right now. Like Emil Dahl, the first person to flash 9 clubs. Once Emil flashed 9 clubs, I knew it. You're going to have more people doing it. And now we have whatever it is, 3, 4, 5. I can't even probably keep up who's flashed 9 clubs now. You know, it's just happening more and more. It's the 4-minute mile, right? It's like as soon as somebody could run a mile under 4 minutes, which was impossible, right? Like before that happened, impossible. Then everybody's like, oh, you can run it faster than 4 minutes? I'll do that. So there's something about this mental relationship to technique. And in juggling, when we talk about technique, there is that creative aspect. There is the unknown, which is so hard to quantify from a mental barrier to overcome that leap, right? Like for Michael to have that epiphany, he had to be next to Sergei Ignatov and have the 11 rings like next to him to be like, ugh! Like some sort of emotional experience. It wasn't like maybe intellectual so much. How do you quantify creativity when we're talking about technique? Does that make sense? Like there's some sort of element there that to break your mind through. It's not technique, but it's still integral to understand. Like it makes a technique hard if you don't know it's possible.
It's like also with painting, like we had the example earlier, right? You can do incredible artwork with painting without necessarily being that technically gifted, or you can be extremely technically gifted but not necessarily create great artwork, right? It can be the same in juggling. Of course, when things come together and you have these technical masters who are also able to express incredible artistry, then things really come together as a whole. But it's not always a given, and I think it's also not necessarily a given in juggling.
I don't think we even have to talk about art. We can just talk about technique itself. I always think of an example where I worked with a woman who was a juggler who grew up kind of outside of the community, right? Like kind of just learned on their own how to juggle, and learned 5 clubs with single flips. Like single flips was the base pattern that she had. And when she did double spins, that was a trick. Like she said, oh, I got a new trick. I got to do double spins. Because, you know, for her, it was like harder because her baseline was single spins. When I grew up, base pattern for 5 clubs was double spins and a trick was single spins. So we don't even have to talk about artistic expression as much as just like simple difficulty of technique. And it's easy to talk about escalating difficulty when we're just doing pure numbers because we know 14 comes after 13 and 15 comes after 14. Like it's easy to do that game. But when we have more like subtle nuances, like, yeah, if your base pattern for 5 clubs is single spins and that's like, you know, intrinsically to you, like that's what you feel is like, this is normal 5 clubs. And then I'm going to do double spins and that's going to be weird because she just wasn't familiar with the double spins. Then we certainly have a weird, like, it's so hard for me to articulate this relationship we have to technique. Then it's so personal is what I mean. We're not butting up against some sort of universal truth of like 4-minute mile, like all these superlatives of like the limit of human ability. When you start to go in the middle of those limits of human abilities or you know, like the more messy, murky depths of the water, it's harder to talk about for me. I get messed up in my head thinking about it. I don't know.
Basically, we're talking almost about frameworks and frameworks that we recognize and that we can move inside, right? Like there are some that are like universally recognized. Like for example, how juggling can be additive. 6 club is better than 5 club. 7 club is better than 6 and so on. And this is so universal that anybody can think. Like for my mom, she doesn't know anything about juggling. Somebody that does 14 balls, it's better than somebody that does 13 balls. First, you have to explain to her that 13 balls, it's insanity and it's a very hard skill to do. But like that's something that it's approachable for everybody, right? So she will not think of somebody doing one ball. This person just started. Like this is the beginning maybe. And at the same time, like I feel like sometimes maybe we are kind of trapped in a very easy way in this kind of framework. Like you said, that person that was just juggling with single throws, 2 spins was a trick for her. It's interesting because it's you just need a different point of view sometimes to think of something. And I mean, it's not the same, but I think of me starting Poi with no guidance at all. So I could do like the most basic trick. And the first thing that I thought of doing was walking backwards while doing it. And for how stupid that sound, sometimes like I miss that kind of ingenuity, because I think there is something in there that it's like, as you said with colors, like it's crazy that we have to talk about incorporating color or dedicating an act to color, making an intentional choice of using color, not just my costume is this color because it goes well with what I'm doing. It's a conscious act of using it and saying I will use this because it's a part of reality and I will add it to what I'm doing. So sometimes I'm wondering what's out there, if there is some very obvious thing that we are missing, some very interesting way, some weird spin, some weird way of using a club that it's so ingenious and so beautiful that we just don't see it. But because for us it's natural to go to 13 clubs, Seb mess, all these things that we think, and everything is a variation of everything else, and we have to move in that space. I wonder if sometimes there is something, just as you said, that weird area just outside, not in the complete unknown. We don't need to create some weird new object to explore it, but just a little bit of a mind shift sometimes. And I'm always wondering about that.
Maybe to kind of sum that up, to sum up some of that a little bit, it's like, the person who ran the first mile under 4 minutes, maybe in the end of the day, they're like faster than the person who actually ran it after them, because they have the mental barrier to overcome. How do you quantify that mental barrier for them to overcome? And so maybe this is the crux, or the middle of the main point of the argument of like, technique is relative to your values or your cultural experience or the traditions you have. And so like right now, nobody's bouncing 2 balls on their heads, so it becomes an impossible trick. We see all the time the trends in juggling developing in terms of technique. It used to be a fun game to show up to the juggling festivals every year, IJA or EJC or whatever. Me and my friends, we'd always go to the festival and we'd say, what's going to be the new trick this year? Because what you would have is people coming from all corners of the world, and they would have independently surfed the zeitgeist of the culture and kind of been like, oh, I came up with this new club kick up or something. But then somebody else would also come to the festival and have had the same development that year. They're not copying each other. This is pre-internet. It was something about in the culture. And so it was about your mind's, your mental relationship to like where we're at as a collective, right? And so, for example, I have another example. I thought of that. In Japan, non-traditional Japanese juggling came to Japan like in the mid-90s, as far as I understand. That's pretty recent. Yeah. Toss, balls, rings, clubs, whatever. And there's not, as far as I understand, there's not a very big professional performing culture in Japan for juggling. You kind of have freedom away from like traditional juggling performing values. Like you're free of like trying to make money with it. So then you're free with all those, all that thought that comes with it in other countries, where it's like, oh, I should do what, like we can take any cliche. I should do eat the apple. I should juggle fire. Like if you're not following that kind of game, if you're not locked into your mental like history or traditions of that, then you're kind of like, I can juggle however I want. I don't have to care about what people are going to think about it or if they hire me or not. And I remember there was the example I always think of. I love the jugglers in Japan. It's like some of my favorite stuff, right? It's just the best because they don't limit themselves mentally before they start. Every idea is kind of equally valid to explore. But many times when I see like some Japanese jugglers doing amazing stuff, I'm just like, I look at the core concept of the idea and I'm like, I never would have pursued that. I would have tried the first version and been like, oh, that's dumb, and like thrown it away. But they don't give up. They're just like, they make 100 versions and then the 100th version is the best thing you've ever seen. Audio people, you're going to suffer for a second. Like the trick I always remember about the Japanese jugglers is a guy took his hand and his other hand around his wrist, and where his fingers can touch around his wrist, he caught a ball there. And he had like 50 variations of catching a ball there, and like with his hand and doing stuff. You know, that's like a perfect example. I would never, like, I would maybe think of that in a rehearsal, maybe, or like in a jam session, and like try to catch a ball there for fun or something. And I'd be like, oh, that was dumb, or that doesn't work, or like that, I don't see where that's gonna go. But they're not preconceived about what they're doing. They're so open. Because there's no history or tradition on their back, like telling them not to do something, right? Like that, like the woman with the 5 club singles. There was no one there being like, hey, when you juggle 5 clubs, you should start with double spins. It gives you more time. It's all relative to our traditions and our history. And so then what you were saying before about frameworks, you're totally right. Are there things then that we're missing? Maybe one short response to that is like, you're totally right. And so that's the first argument about maybe why the history of juggling could be relevant. Like everybody thinks history of juggling is kind of a curiosity. Like right now it's having a nice resurgence in the culture that people are kind of cool about the juggling history. Like it's always kind of just like, oh, it's a curiosity. It's fun to know some facts, but like it doesn't apply to me. And it's like, no, it totally directly applies to you. Like it's why you are here and you don't know it. Like I don't know it, because we don't know those stories and how it evolved, but it's on our back all the time. So it's good to go back in history and understand what are the traditions, what are the unspoken rules that we're following that we don't even realize that we're following, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was also in Japan last year here for the Japanese Juggling Festival and traveling a bit around afterwards. And there were a lot of interesting things about it. Like you said, there isn't really a performing scene, like a lot of performance opportunity as far as like living from it goes. So many jugglers were also then performing for production companies and part of like commercials or films or things like this, and doing various effects things and tricks things and very different. Or going to Taiwan or China or something like this to perform also. But one thing that really struck me about the Japanese community is that they don't seem to be that interconnected somehow. Like I think in Europe, for example, there's pretty good interconnectedness in the scene. We have EJC, we have various events, we are sharing a lot online, people start to know each other, become friends and so on. But there were lots of Japanese people that I met there. I mentioned some other Japanese juggler and they were like, I've never heard of this person, I don't know them. Like lots of people who never went to a Japanese juggling festival, even though they have been professional or semi-professional performers or jugglers for many years, and they never went to a Japanese juggling festival. Like then they go to EJC, maybe things like this, and and this also, I think it's part of the reason why there are some really, for us, feels unique and to a certain extent strange ideas coming out, because it feels like it's more smaller, isolated communities within Japan in a way that I don't know to the same extent in, for example, Europe.
I mean, that's a great thing to think about, because I mean, in one way, then what you're describing the situation in Japan, it's a little bit like the rest of the world pre-internet. So then internet came, kind of made the global culture, which in one way, or in many ways, is incredible. Hey, the three of us can talk right now together. It's awesome to meet you guys. Like, sincerely, this is so cool. So like the internet did a lot of good things. It also did destroy a lot of local variation. And the thing I think about is there was a juggler came from the north of Sweden, juggling 3 rings and in ways that we'd never seen before, like down in Stockholm. And it's like, because they were just alone up in the cabin in the forest. And didn't have any jugglers around them, and there was no internet, and and this person didn't seek out like VHS tapes and didn't seek out juggling culture. It was just like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to juggle these things. The thing I always think about, if we go back to now we're talking about art and being an artist, there's like kind of this eternal debate about like, I know so many jugglers, I mean a lot of jugglers who were artists or wanted to be artists, who said, I'm an artist, and so I refuse to watch any other juggling because I don't want to be subconsciously influenced. And then there's the other side of the spectrum of like, well, I'm a juggling artist, and therefore it's my job to know every single thing I can about juggling and maybe the world and whatever else. And obviously I fall on that side of the discussion because many times I've just seen examples where the jugglers who refuse to engage kind of the culture or just stick their head in the sand, they oftentimes invent something, sure, but they invent a thing that's already been invented and done like way better. And so you can say, yeah, I'm not copying anybody, but it's all at the same time, you're like, yeah, but you're also kind of trying to reinvent the wheel. It's not a very efficient process. And then you run the risk of, anyway, plagiarism, even if it's unintended. It's, plagiarism and things like that. It's more almost like a marketing campaign. Like, hey guys, I invented the triangle 2 years before Michael Moschen did. It doesn't matter. Like, Michael published a national TV show with the triangle, and like everybody knows it's Michael's triangle. So it's a little bit like site swap, right? Like you have Paul Klimek with quantum juggling coming out. I mean, it didn't come out, but it was invented before site swap. But site swap was kind of published first, and then that's why the name site swap stuck. But Paul had his quantum juggling a few years before, I think. He just didn't spread it around. And now we start to uncover that history, and it's a fun story, but we still call it site swap. Nobody's calling it quantum juggling.
That likely won't change for a while. You mentioned also here, like, for example, Michael then publishing the triangle and developing it and so on. You are also someone who, I would say quite famously, have developed quite a lot of different props and trying to combine props to a certain extent in new ways. Some things that come to mind would be the clubs with holes in them, and the cup clubs, I believe it's also your invention, as well as 8 rings, who have also become a bit of a thing on its own, like become quite a lot of people who perform with 8 rings and practice that quite a lot. What's your process when you say, I want to develop a new prop?
So one thing, we can go back to, let's hit all 3 of those things you mentioned. That really, it's like nice little quick examples. So the clubs with holes in them, it goes back to you mixing colors with your silicone knob mold, where I go, okay, most of my props that I've spent the majority of my time with, like in terms of learning technique, my vocabulary, my physical vocabulary with the prop, it's plastic props. And I'm not a plastics manufacturer. I don't really know how to work with plastics. I don't make molds. I don't injection mold. I don't know how to mix plastic. I don't know how to, I don't have the machinery. I don't have the experience. So I go, okay, I can't create from scratch. I have to use what's already there. And so then the club with the hole in it was really a linear conscious thought process from this, what I just said. I go, I can't create unless I use what's already there. And if I'm using what's already there, then I have 2 choices. I can either add something to the club, or I can take something away. And then I go, well, okay, I can try to add, but then now I'm talking about what? Like either fusing plastic to other plastic. Well, I don't have that ability. Of course, I can make different attachments out of metal or wood or string, which I tried, But then on the other side, I can definitely cut the club in pieces. and then I could cut a hole in it. And what does that do? I could start to remove sections of it. And so that's just a really quick starting point for that journey. The cup head was not made by me. It was made by Iman and Tom from Renegade Juggling. I just met Iman a couple weeks ago, and she was telling me that it was actually her. She made the cup head. She made the design of the cup head. They basically had these fat head clubs, and she cut the top off and flipped it over to try to make something new. Like, she was really interested, or is really interested in trying new things and kind of breaking, not tradition, but like to not be bored. Like, hey, I make juggling props. I'm in a shop, and like we make the same thing every day. Like, what if we made something different for fun? And of course, there's always the monetary consideration for that, where I understand it's a business. Henry's and Play and Mr. Babosh and whatever, they're not doing it for fun. And so they also have to think like, well, if I make something new, is the research and development going to be paid back? Am I going to sell enough to break even and then like pay my overheads and overhead costs and stuff? But Iman was cool. She was just like, she wasn't, and I'm not saying that Play and like all those other people are only interested in money. Don't get me wrong. But Iman was really like, at Renegade Juggling, Iman was really like, I don't care about the money. I want to make something cool that's fun. Like, let's just try something out. And so she had made those clubs and sent them to me. And then because it was that process of like the fat head club and cutting it off and flipping it over, it was never really, that fat head club mold was never intended to be cut off and flipped over and hold a ball. in one way random. I mean, the specific design was just a random thing to try out, an experiment. And then I refined the Cuphead Club. It took about 15 years. And then finally I worked with Drew Astelin and Will Altman and then Niels Donkier. And this team, we got this new Cuphead Club where the cup actually fits a ball. Like it's made in the shape of a ball. Yeah, the 8-ring was when I was whatever. I wrote the whole thing up on Facebook at one point, which Facebook is like the worst archive of information. But I was, 11 years old or something, and I taped 2 rings together. And I have to say, still to this day, I've never made the 8-ring. I don't think anybody's made the 8-ring. Because when I taped the 2 rings together, I juggled it. And I had a set of 3 of them. You know, I taped 6 rings, 3 pairs of 6 rings, and I just wanted to do toss juggling. And of course, when you just tape rings together, you get they're side by side. And then when you go to release two sets of those in one hand, they get stuck. And still to this day, nobody has made a 8-ring injection mold the way you would mold a normal ring and then injection molded one piece. That being said, people have made amazing 8 rings with magnetic joints so they break down in your backpack and all sorts of amazing colors and variations and sizes and shapes and stuff, because the technique that evolved with the 8-ring was not one I intended or that I envisioned at the beginning. That wasn't how it kind of like the Cuphead, right? Like Iman's like, what if we just turn this over? And then there's a refinement of like the utility of that. And then the 8-ring, I was just going to throw and catch it like everything else. But the way it popped off in the culture was a different technique. And then it evolved in a different way, which doesn't necessitate an injection molded 8-ring. So I'm still waiting for my 8-ring.
Sure, we'll get you some 8 rings at some point.
Yeah, how does it feel to see something like 8 rings? You mentioned you developed at quite a young age. To see it develop and become something completely different than you intended.
One thing is, like you mentioned, being in Japan, and I've been to the JJF Japan Juggling Festival a few times. And, last time I was there, it was like, I always have to leave the gym. I can't take it after a while. Like my eyes can't take it. I'll be looking over in one direction and there'll be like 50 club jugglers doing the craziest club juggling. And I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't take it. I just gotta look over here. And then there's like a group of, 50 people doing shaker cups, craziest things you've ever seen. And then wherever you look, it's insane. I just have to step out of the room for a little bit and like gather myself. I get too overwhelmed. But in one of those cases, it was like literally 40 people, because they were like, we're going to do an 8-ring jam in the corner of the gym. If you want to come, like bring your 8 rings. I'm thinking there's going to be like 2 people there, or 3 people. It was like 40 jugglers with 8 rings and like random, like it's just so random. I mean, that's more about Japan maybe than the evolution of my prop, but like it blew my mind that there would be so many people in one place doing this niche thing of a niche genre, of a niche subculture, of a niche hobby. That was pretty incredible.
But I would say, as far as like the sort of wider appreciation of the prop, it's not that niche. Like I'm thinking of someone like Xiao from Poland, for example, who have videos with millions of views of doing 8 rings, and it's something that seems to really kind of fascinate the general public.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's true. I guess I always, the Eric Oberry thing of like bad self-esteem juggler, when we look out into the world and compare ourselves to like skateboarding as like a global culture or like rock climbing or something, like where it's just so small. That's kind of just more what I meant. But that's a good point. Yeah, there is something about the optical illusion of isolation that Moschen brought to, like back in the day, that Moschen kind of started this idea of the isolation into the techniques, that the 8-ring definitely was built, like the popularity of the 8-ring was built upon, and then that is something that's really captivating to the general public outside of like the juggling practitioners. That's a good point. Yeah.
I think that it's interesting though that you are so easygoing with this thing coming from you, but not claiming it in any way. Like as you said, like juggling is also a business in a way. And I remember when I just started juggling back in 2010 or 11, there was this whole controversy about this cone juggling apparatus. There was a group or a troupe that was using it without commercially. They were doing shows with it, like not I want to just practice this. It was like a pure no, I'm gonna make money off this thing. That there is no patent, there is no copyright in this very small niche. So I'm like, and don't get me wrong, I think everything should be open source in juggling, like going down to specific shapes of things and stuff, because I think that locking people out of using things is never a good idea for the art. That said, I also don't run a prop maker shop, so I don't want to speak for others, so that's totally fine. But I think it's very interesting that there are always like two mentalities there, like into being like, oh no, this is my thing and I need to get as much of it, I have to extract as much of it, and only I have to extract as much of it out of this thing, and other people just being open to throwing things in the culture, in the zeitgeist, and see what they can produce. It's also kind of like, in a way, kind of like a short-term, long-term thing, because you're like, yeah, I did this thing, and then there you are, X years later, with us going like, yeah, you invented a thing, you are the guy that made it, like, this is our, like, giving back to you in a way, like, so it's interesting.
I have some pretty strong personal feelings about all of it. So, but a couple of things to get there. Like, one is that there seems to be like something that Eric and I recognize, where an idea will come out and it will be a problem in the community. Like, it's a problem. And then like 10 years later, it's not a problem anymore. It's just part of the culture. So like when SiteSwap came out, SiteSwap was not okay. It was not cool. Like, SiteSwap was not juggling. It was something that was something else. It was threatening to people who had been juggling without SiteSwap for all those years. And then someone came along and said, oh, there's 534. And they're just like, no, but that's not juggling. That's something weird. It's not for me. And nowadays we've come full circle where so many jugglers I meet, they don't use SiteSwap. They don't care. But it's not because they think it's useless or dumb or not juggling. It's because it's become so ubiquitous that they know what it is. It's just become embedded in the culture that it's so second nature. They don't even think about it. And so I've seen that whole journey. Like, it's just wild. Like, there was no SiteSwap, and then SiteSwap came in. It was a problem. And then everybody was kind of doing it. And now we don't do it because it's just so common that you don't even think about it, Like Eric's definition of juggling talk, it starts to be a little bit easier to talk about it these days because we've done it so long. When Iman at Renegade Juggling made the ring that was in the shape of a triangle, she brought it to the EJC in Svinborg 2002, I think. The triangle was a problem. She came and gave them to me. Hey, Jay, I made a funny thing for you. Instead of circles, they're triangles. I thought you should have them. Haha. People got mad at me. People were like, not everybody, but like literally a few people were mad at me that I had these triangle rings. They're like, those aren't rings. That's not juggling. Like, what are you talking about? We made a circle to a triangle. It's not a manufacturing problem. Iman nailed it. Like, that's an impossible mountain for me to climb. I can't take my circle babash ring and make it into a triangle. I can't do it. She could. She made the roto-molded triangle. But like, in terms of a concept, like even juggling, they don't have to talk about art. Taking a circle to a triangle, it's like the first thing you think of in one way. But nowadays, people have those triangle rings and also different shapes. And it's cool. We're all cool with each other. It's fun. Like, nowadays, it feels like if you had a triangle ring, people will come up and be like, oh, that's fun. It's maybe not for me, but it's fun that you have it. Like, at least there's a respect that comes with the experience. So that's one thing I can say. The other thing I can say is when we started Renegade Design Lab back in 2008, 2009, we tried to give those props out to the world on purpose. Luke Wilson had a Creative Commons license on everything. Back in 2009, the general response was, I don't want to juggle those things. Those are your things. And if I juggle those things, people are going to say I'm ripping you off. So even to try to intentionally like spread things in the culture was difficult, to give them away or whatever. I think that's easier to do now, potentially. Like, again, ideas become normalized. And as the old guard dies out, with their entrenched thinking of the traditions of the past, the new generation comes into juggling and they just take it for granted. The same thing I did when I came into juggling. I go, oh yeah, there's balls, rings, and clubs. That's what you do. Like, that always existed, and I didn't know any better. So I'll just wrap this up by saying my opinion about the whole copying or stealing or copyright or plagiarism thing. I think the juggling community and juggling culture is so small. It's like it's so fragile. Like we're always on the brink of just like collapsing and like disappearing forever in one way. Like it's just so fragile. It's so rare. It's so few people juggling. It's so few prop manufacturers. I mean, now in America, when I grew up, it was Brian Dubé, Todd Smith, and Renegade. Brian retired, Todd Smith passed away. We just have Renegade left. There was 3 people and now there's 1. That's pretty brutal if you think about the culture of just even as a hobby. And so I think it's a very fragile culture we're in. And the world is small enough and electronic communication is easy enough. We can just be nice to each other and ask each other. Like if I want to do something that you're doing, I can just talk to you. It's juggling. We talk about this all the time as being a perk of juggling. Oh my God, the best jugglers or whatever, the best artists in our field, we can actually talk to them. Like everybody says that's a cool thing about juggling. I think it's a cool thing about juggling. But I think you can also then just talk to them and be like, hey, that thing you're doing, look, let's be real. Michael Moschen's alive. He's alive. You can write to Michael and be like, hey, Michael, I'd like to perform your triangle. Is that cool? If Michael writes back and says, nah, I'd rather you didn't do that. You can just be like, okay, I understand. I respect that. I'll do something else. Because that's the other thing about juggling is that it's so infinite and unexplored. We don't need to disrespect people. That's just my opinion. And I've always heard the argument be like, there's 2 types of people in juggling. Like one person is the person who is always just going to be creating no matter what and giving and giving and giving. And the other person is there to kind of propagate those ideas and copy them and bring them into the future endlessly. But pretty soon it's a snake eating its own tail, because if the people who always make new ideas, if they don't get any new ideas back from somewhere else, they're going to run out of ideas. I can speak to that personally. Whereas if we all do a little bit of like maybe some new ideas, maybe some old ideas, and we have a conversation with respect, it's a sustainable path to the future.
Yeah, it's a lot of my work also in juggling research and technique is finding old unexplored tricks that used to be popular with Poi, for example, for 25 years ago, kind of not really carried that well into the YouTube era of juggling. And then finding some of those niche underexplored tricks and putting them into a more modern framework also. It's a bit like you say with the bouncing of the balls on the headset. Like it's tricks that were there, but then they kind of get forgotten over the years. And a lot of these tricks are surprisingly difficult. I keep thinking to myself, people did it like 25 years ago when people did tricks that we consider now easy and attainable nowadays. But some of the tricks are surprisingly difficult. Yeah, so it goes to show that it really depends on which direction the culture goes, where they dive deep and find really difficult things. But I want to bring the conversation a bit back to what you said earlier. When you started, there was balls, rings, and clubs. You know, you pick one or pick all 3. You, of course, famously have also been searching for the 4th shape. We had on our very first episode Bo on, who made the claim that maybe rope is the 4th shape. What do you think about this?
The idea of the 4th shape was like more of a conceptual kind of like statement of searching for the new or being curious about the world, actually. It wasn't really about finding a 4th shape or being able to define a 4th shape, but like what if there was? It was kind of this constant mystery, like this quest for like thirst for curiosity and experimentation. Like what if there was a 4th shape? What would that be? If we talk about it in reality, because I had a lot of people take it literally, which is great. I mean, because of course it's a literal statement. The 4th shape, it's the 4th shape, not what is a 4th shape or something, but like the 4th shape. And a lot of people took it literally, and then they would say, well, it's the cigar box because of this and this and this, or it's blah, blah, blah because of this and this and this. And I feel like if we really confront the 4th shape as a literal kind of finite thing, it's the same thing as the definition of the word juggling. It's a collective creation. That's like, I can't just be like, yep, cigar boxes are the 4th shape because they do this and this and this, and then therefore it's the 4th shape. It's kind of like balls, rings, and clubs. You have to understand how they evolved into the culture. It's from Rastelli, right? Like Enrico Rastelli was so popular that he juggled the balls, plates, and sticks. And you can see how plates and sticks easily transition into rings and clubs. But he was so popular that in the culture, he kind of locked that down as a thing that we still have today. Like that's how popular he was. And so, yeah, maybe we'll have the cigar box juggler who's so popular that they define that as a 4th shape that everybody wants to emulate because it's such a strong thing that this person does with cigar boxes. It's the same thing as the definition of the word juggling. We collectively use the word juggling in a context, and the definition is observing how that word is used. So the fourth shape is also just kind of observing how props are used in the world. I think in the same way that the definition of juggling, there isn't one definition of juggling. As any word in language doesn't have only one concrete lockdown definition. It's fluid. Language is fluid. Culture is fluid. The fourth shape is fluid. So in Beau's world, I'm sure he's looking around observing what he sees in the world as maybe that he's experiencing in his juggling life. And then he reflects on that and says, oh, the rope or whatever, right? In different parts of the world, people are going to have different answers or different suggestions. It is pretty crazy how the ball, ring, and club has stayed so relevant as a trio, as a trilogy, more or less through however many decades. That's maybe more impressive than that's maybe more surprising than being like, oh, there's not really a fourth shape that's ubiquitous. It's like, no, it's the opposite. It's like more impressive that the ball, ring, and club has managed to just have this longevity as a cultural phenomenon, I think.
Yeah, it's so ingrained, right? When people say juggling and they are automatically, the image is someone with a ball or a club or a ring, right? It happens just kind of automatically. I love this, what Eric also said on your Object Episodes podcast, of how, imagine if we called, it's like sport, right? And then imagine if there was one type of sport that was also called sport, like basketball is now called sport. So then you can say, I play sport, but do you play sport, or do you play a different sport? You know, like it reminds me also of some languages, like for example, Japanese, where food and rice shares the same word, and rice is just so ingrained as like, this is food. So you want to say, let's get some food. You say, let's get some rice. But it's like, is it rice or is it rice different, right? And to a certain extent, club rings and balls are the rice of juggling, like as a comparison, right? If we were in an East Asian culture.
You mean, it's the juggling of juggling?
Exactly, yeah. It's the juggling of juggling.
That's right. Totally.
Because lots of the things that we do now are so developed from these concepts, you know, like you say, then you make the 8 ring, and it's the circles combined, or like Rocco and I, we mainly use poi, but it's still a ball connected to maybe another ball or a round shape or something like this. Like the shapes are just, of course, some things came from also to a certain extent before these shapes, but are still emulating them. Like Diablo, you have still the sticks, you have the 2 half cups. It's still very much those shapes, right, that kind of repeat themselves. And I think the reason why they have this longevity is because there is something foundational to like the geometric shapes of them that just make them so applicable to juggling.
Potentially. Immediately I'm with you, and then I start to remember all my other assumptions that I go, yeah, I think there could be a universal truth and some sort of utility of those objects, but man, I think it's probably just more cultural. Like, who knows if Rastelli would have juggled triangle shapes, like, you know what I mean? Because I still think technically, I'm still wrestling with that whole technical aspect of like the utility of the props versus our skills and everything's like wrapping up into one big picture, right? So absolutely, there's probably something fundamental about the ball, ring, and club. We can also draw parallels between the 3 shapes and kind of post-intellectualize like why they exist like that. It's the point and the line and the blah, blah, blah. But I don't know, man. It could also just be a cultural random thing. For example, everybody thinks Circus. So Circus was started by Philip Astley in 17, like whatever, you can Google it. And it was like, acrobatics and juggling and handstand and trapeze and tight wire or whatever it was, like 7 different disciplines, right? And people constantly find parallels between all those disciplines and say Circus is, like in modern times, Circus is this genre, it contains these activities and they are related by this. But it's by happenstance. Yes, we can find similarities in those disciplines, but the reason they exist in Circus was by chance. It was just by random accident what Philip Astley did. There's nothing more intellectual or truthful or universally true about that journey. So the fact that juggling is classified alongside handstand, it's by accident. We can find, the skill, the training, the discipline, the whatever, execution, commonalities between them. But there's no universal truth between them. And one thing I wanted to say about, the fourth shape. when we talk, like I was saying, maybe the fourth shape is different in these different niches, like in different countries or different localized communities. I don't know. Will we ever get a fourth shape? Like now we're living in the age of internet, whatever it is, 2.0, 3.0. Whereas before the internet, we had what they call a monoculture. So there was three TV channels, and we all listened to the same radio station, and we all read the same one newspaper. You know what I mean? Like in terms of this diversification or whatever of like information. And so nowadays you see that effect on the juggling community. There used to be International Juggling Information Service, and there was like rec.juggling was like the online forum. This was before Internet 2.0. And that's where everybody talked about juggling. There was one place and it was there. So we would all have a chance to have more of a common idea, and therefore even a better chance to have a common idea of the fourth shape back then with rec.juggling. Nowadays, and then for a while, like it was like juggling rock on Facebook for many years. Yeah. But nowadays, it's like it's all fractured. Like the community in one way is fractured. Like let's say I have a juggling idea, which I have sometimes, that I want to tell the juggling world or share or talk about, like have a conversation with. I don't know what to do. I can make a Facebook status and then that disappears the next day. Yeah. I can go on one of the like 20 different Facebook groups, which also that will like disappear the next day. I can make an Instagram post. Like it doesn't work anymore. We're all fractured and localized, and you can even see it in terms of not just online discussion, but physical festivals. So the EJC festival in America used to be the biggest juggling festival of the year, and once a year, and you had to go because that was the one place you had access to information and community and whatever development. And then suddenly, in mirroring the evolution of how the internet went into Web 2.0 stuff and kind of fracturing everything, same thing happened to the festivals in America. Now it's like Portland Juggling Festival has probably more people going than EJC. Madfest in Madison, Wisconsin, Mondo in Minneapolis, all these festivals, all the regional festivals became bigger than the central festival. And that's kind of symbolic, like physically symbolic of like what we've done, like how we have our communities now organized online. And so I'm not sure if we'll ever get a fourth shape, because it is a collective consciousness that will solidify that. And like, I don't think we have that anymore.
But do you think the same also applies to European community? Like I'm thinking, of course, EJC, who is not always the biggest event, because sometimes it takes places in some corners of Europe that's not so easily accessible. But sometimes it's absolutely massive, right? You have 5,000, 8,000 jugglers sometimes in the very same place, right? And it seems to still maintain the status as the place to go for like the European scene. People are still talking about various EJCs, how it went, how specific gala acts on some EJCs kind of live on in people's imagination or in a shared cultural experience in the European scene.
Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn about EJC or like this is not my opinion. I'm just going to repeat something I've heard. I've heard this for the past few years that EJC, yeah, there's 8,000 people there, which, man, it's just crazy. I remember going to some festival, EJC back in the day, it was like 4,000 people and I couldn't handle it. It was like you'd see your friend on the first day. Oh, hey, what's up? You know, Rocco, we should hang out. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes. And I never see you for 7 days.
Never see them again.
It's like 4,000 people. But I heard now, like recently, the past few years from my friends and stuff in my little circle of community, that it's like, yeah, there's 8,000 people, but those people are more there for the party. Like EJC kind of became more known as like a hangout party, like good time. It's not a bad thing, but maybe the more special localized, and sorry, following on from that, you were talking about the EJC gala. I've also heard people saying like, yeah, but these days it's kind of all diluted a little bit, like less specialized or something. I don't know. I haven't been for a while. But then you have things like pass out where it's like, we just going to focus on club passing. And then that's really more specialized in terms of pushing maybe some sort of innovation or whatever in terms of the culture, like the edge of the culture or something. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have personal experience with that, but it is something I've been hearing. And I always try to keep my eyes and ears open. What's happening in the juggling world? Like what's going on, what's the new thing, or what are people talking about?
Yeah, EJC, of course, there is party, there are bands playing, there is a bar and so on, but there are also these full shows, 45-minute show, 1 hour show, group performances, amazing stuff. and the ability through the size of it to also book acts that wouldn't normally perform on, say, a regular smaller convention, where the convention maybe can't offer payment, maybe they can offer to cover your travel cost and ticket or things like this. But EJC has the budget to like full on book professional groups, which brings, I think that's what also part of, as far as shows go, something that EJC can really provide is this accessibility to the professional acts that otherwise wouldn't be able to go because they are dependent on the money for their livelihood, right?
No, but you're right though. I mean, EJC still, in terms of my experience of European community, it still is like a lot of people I meet are like, I cannot miss EJC. I have to go to EJC. Like for whatever reason, like it is for the shows or the party or all of it, you know, combined. But like, it's like, I will see you at EJC. Like I am not missing it. Like I went last year and I'll never miss it again. So people, you know, it still does give this like superlative experience somehow of like the culture that people are passionate about it. And I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, you of course have talked quite a bit about the culture, you know, where is it headed, what kind of ideas are there, sort of shared cultural and historical heritage. Where would you like to see juggling culture develop?
Maybe we can start a little bit on that answer with like, where are we right now? Or like some reflections on that maybe.
Yep.
And I can say that like, you know, you guys are doing Poi again, back in the day, like I don't have dates in my head, but 2010, like whatever, pick a year even. There was like maybe a war between like the toss jugglers and the flow artists. And that's probably even back before there was the term flow, like becoming popular as its own culture and own genre. But now in recent years, like it seems like to me in America, this is just my personal experience, probably because of how my travel schedule and just personal experiences. Maybe other people have a rhythm different than this, but I think the effect is the same. That like after COVID, everybody was friends. Like everybody's cool. I went to an IJA festival in America after COVID, and like I was shocked because not only was like there was the 7 club jugglers and the poi jugglers and the hula hoop jugglers and the contact ball jugglers or whatever you want to list, right? Not only were they like kind of like peacefully coexisting, they were like talking to each other. Like Spencer Androli's there doing like 7 club tricks, and then like there's a poi juggler there having a conversation about juggling. That's so cool. That sounded so dumb, but like I could see the future. But logically, if you thought about it, back when poi became popular or started to come out in the culture, and there was all this fighting between people, what is juggling, what's not juggling, because again, they're all trying to define it on technique. Doesn't work. Juggling is a cultural activity and as an identity. It was so obvious, I think, when that whole fight came out, that like, shouldn't we're all doing the same thing. We're all just working on different pieces of the same puzzle, you know? And like we share so much in common, and you're focusing on this aspect of it. I'm focusing on that aspect of it. Like we're doing the same thing. And so I think that what I see now in the culture, especially in the past few years, from my experience, and I wonder what you think, but like everybody's kind of more come together and been more forgiving and more understanding and more cooperative and having more common conversations. Like, don't you feel like the flow and the juggling worlds are just like merging better? Or
yeah, I think Poi specifically has also had a bit of this thesis, antithesis, synthesis moment, like you described with the triangle, where there was some opposition to it. And within Poi, there was also, at least in the European scene, many people now consider it more juggling and are a bit opposed to the flow arts or flow artist term. But it depends again on the individual bubble. It seems to be still more common in the USA, for example. But in Europe, there's definitely been sort of a merging where Poi is now part of the wider juggling culture. I think it also is related to if a culture has its own identity next to juggling, it takes longer before there is some merging going on. Like I went to a juggling convention some years ago, and there was a freestyle skateboarder performing on the gala show. And I was like, that's cool. Maybe freestyle skateboarding will one day be part of juggling culture, but it might not be. And some things spring to mind, of course, something like yo-yo, which is very much its own scene also, with their own competition, their own events. And you do see people play yo-yo on EJC, but it's not that wide compared to how big the community actually is, right? Or something like kendama, for example, which is also a bit of a world on its own. And there are some people who do kendama who go to juggling events, but it's still a bit of their own thing. They have their own expressions, their own heritage. And so the merging, it's not so, I think the more strong the identity is outside of juggling, the longer it takes before there is some sort of merging from both sides also. Having something like poi, whatever you want to say, like flow culture, merging with juggling culture, I think it has also made big difference on juggling culture and the expressions that we have. We see now a lot of club jugglers who are very kind of flow artists, to put it in those terms, in the way that they express themselves. And to the point where it's almost like the popular style of juggling, right? You go on EJC and loads of people are doing now free clubs, lots of sort of laces and very expressive motion, these curved motions and so on. And I think we as a culture, as a community are richer for it, but I also understand that it's not something that happens from one day to the next, this kind of merging of ideas. It takes time. And I think with poi it has happened, but it will likely happen with more cultures merging with juggling over time.
Yeah, I mean, so where do I want it to go in the future is a little bit like, I've been studying magic culture for the past, 8 years or something. And the culture of not in popular culture or society, but like the magic culture, like we talk about juggling culture. Because I find it really fascinating, and I don't understand anything about the magic culture. Coming from being a juggler, there's so many differences that I just can't wrap my head around. So I find it really fascinating to study magic culture. And I don't want to be a magician. I don't want to learn magic technique or tricks, but I think there's a lot of great philosophy in magic. And the reason I'm attracted to looking at magic is because, once again, it's an order of magnitude bigger than juggling. If we talk about the magic community, you can maybe add 1 or 2 zeros on the end of the number of people doing it. And talking about juggling being so fragile and so few people doing it, it's like Anthony Gatto retires. There's not another Anthony.
Yes.
So it's kind of law of averages. You just go like, well, if we had 1 million more people juggling, we might have a chance to have another Anthony. So magic has a lot more people doing it. So they have a lot more they have a lot more history and depth of the culture. And so there's a couple of things I like about the magic community that I would love that the juggling community could kind of develop. And one of the best things I think is that magicians, well, first of all, they publish books. That's like the thing they do a lot. I understand this is not like a one-to-one mapping, because like they publish books because they have secrets to tell. And jugglers don't really have secrets to tell. But I love that there's like literature in the magic community. But one aspect of the literature that's really cool is that generally from the beginning, if you're a magician, you kind of know where your techniques came from. And again, I don't think that's an egotistical thing, like going back to like the 8 ring or whatever, that I need people to know where that prop came from. But it's more the understanding of the technique. Again, going back to understanding the evolution of where have we been, and where are we going? And so it's really cool that magicians, even amateur, like really beginner magicians, might say, oh, I'm doing a Slidini variation of the Cardini blah, blah, blah effect. I'm not a magician. But like it's embedded in the culture that they talk like that. And I don't need people to be like, oh, I'm doing the Androli variation of the Gattoplex or something. But what I would love is that jugglers, or as a community, that we are just interested in where stuff comes from. It's so funny how quickly things come into the culture and how quickly people just have no idea where they came from. So you were talking about like the poi, for example, influence coming into club juggling. 110%. That's all you see these days is like a lot of the poi aesthetic in the club juggling. I guarantee if you go up to me and be like, hey, where did that throw come from, or that idea come? I'd be like, I don't know. And it's not because I'm not interested. Clearly I'm interested, like we're having this conversation, but like it's not embedded in our culture to keep track of that stuff or value it. It's just, and I'm not saying that it has to go that way. I'm just saying it would be so fun. Like you just asked what I personally would like to see. It'd be so fun if we had a little bit more of a idea of where ideas came from and then where they're going and where, I don't know. Like, I think that would be a nice evolution of the juggling culture. So to kind of like sum that up, it's like back to Eric Oberry's thing of we're in the age of consciousness with juggling. So normally juggling's intuitive. Like when I start off juggling, when I'm a kid, when I'm 8 years old, I just use this ring because I'm not thinking about it. Somebody gave me a ring. Oh, here you go. It's this color, it's this size, blah, blah, blah. And then I don't think about it. But nowadays, for the past, 15 years, we start to enter the age of consciousness in juggling. And I would love to see as a culture that we continue that journey and that we have. So what does that mean in reality? It's like we're having conversations like this more. It's super fun. Guys, this is super rare that I get to talk to people like you and have a conversation like this, right? Like I don't do it all the time. So this is awesome. Like more of this, more thinking about our traditions and our habits and like more, collectively kind of imagining the future of juggling. But in order to collectively imagine the future together, we need to be conscious of like what we're working with. And like I always think about this, maybe this is the last thing to say about the culture thing. I always feel it's like jugglers are so passionate and they're so cool and they work so hard. Like you guys are awesome. And like a lot of jugglers we meet, it's like cool people, right? Like we connect with those people and we see a lot of good that they're doing. But I feel like everybody's working on their own thing a lot, or like even little pockets of juggling communities are working on their own things a lot. And I just feel like if we could just get together a little bit more on the same page or have conversations and have common goals, we could go even farther with the energy and resources we have. But sometimes we're stuck because we don't really, like, again, we're fractured with the internet, like in terms of where we have discussions. And it seems harder to pull together a collective energy to push juggling further, like where I see it could maybe go. Does that make sense? Like we're all a little bit like on our own. We're all a little bit on our own. It'd be cool to pull it together a bit more and have it like punch farther.
Yeah, it's interesting, of course, just pulling from the past, seeing where it can develop over time, and having this sort of shared identity, also shared heritage, and exploring that more. I think it's also definitely something I try to be more and more conscious of. Where did this prop develop? Who innovated this trick? Who were the people? But even I find it difficult to research a lot of things with, for example, Poi. Like it's not that old. Most of the techniques, most of the people are alive today. I can talk to them, but I don't always know who they are. Like sometimes there are some YouTube videos in low resolution or some post on some Home of Poi forum, and I can't necessarily reach out to these people. It's not always an option, right? People leave community for all sorts of reasons. And that's definitely part of the reason we want to do also this podcast, to kind of have some of these conversations and have some of these ideas be brought out into a wider audience.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, right? Like I experienced the same challenges, what you just said. Absolutely. I think it's just something as simple, like it's really hard to articulate what I feel. But like it says something as simple as this. I always have this one story, but I'm going to add to it now. And that is when I learned how to juggle, when they taught me how to juggle, okay, you throw one ball like this. Okay. Throw two balls like this. Okay. Throw three balls like this. And they said, and now smile. And now smile. And that's because, hey, I learned to juggle in like 1985 or whatever. Back then, it's like, it was even less of a hobby and more of a thing from traditional circus back in the day and vaudeville in America back in the day. So and now smile because you're going to perform. But what if that person would have said, here's how you throw three balls and now you can create your own trick? It would have blown my mind. Nobody told me that. Like when I learned. And what if they would have said, here's how you throw three balls and now you can create your own trick. And actually, the person who created this trick was this person. That would have put the seed in my head, right? Of like, oh, I'm going to care. Like I wouldn't have thought about it. I'm 8 years old. You just imitate, right? You're unconscious, you're intuitive, but it would have planted that seed that eventually I just would have done it. I just been like, oh, cool. I can make my own trick. And that person Michael Moschen made the triangle. Cool. Like, you know what I mean? So it's more just embedding the attitude in the culture as opposed to even the specific challenges that you talked about right now. Like those are real challenges, but just having that innate like consciousness about what we're doing, I just think would be wonderful. And I always go back to that moment of learning how to do three balls. And if someone would have said, just a few more little tidbits, like.
Yeah, I want to bring, I listened also to one of your recent podcasts. You were on a magic podcast. And there you had a really interesting conversation about juggling as an art form. You were trying to formulate what is it that juggling can express as an art form that is sort of, in a way, I would say, unique to juggling. And I've been also putting some thoughts of this, like what is it that juggling really can express as an art form that's sort of unique to that. And the more I think about it, the more I really like this concept of like a liminality, a sort of in-between space between what we know and what is going to be in this sort of unknown sphere. And I think that's something that, at least in my opinion, when I watch, for example, some of your performances where you have a lot of objects and they behave in ways that the objects are often known to us, but it's not known how they are going to act, how they are going to perform, how you are going to interact with them. And every time I watch your act, I'm always like, I'm sitting there thinking, it's very beautiful, but I don't know what to expect. And this space, like this unexpectedness, you juggle, for example, these balls of yarn, right? And you can see where they have passed through, but we don't know where they are moving to. And I think this sort of liminality is what really is quite unique to juggling in a way that I don't experience it in the same way from other art forms.
I can speak personally about my intention of performing, which is that my favorite thing to do as a performer is to have the audience say two things. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I want to find out. And
that's my experience.
That's great, because and that's hard to do, because there's a fine line there between I don't know what's going to happen next and I don't care. Screw this guy. Like he's lost me. I'm alienated. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't care. And I don't care. Like that's really easy to do. Like, I don't know what this guy's doing. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't want to be here. Like that's easy to do. But to say like, I don't know what's going to happen next and I want to find out, that's the cool moment for me. That's where I'm like, oh yeah, now we're going to the moon together. Like now we can just go to outer space, because like you'll follow me. Like if I build that relationship right with the audience and I craft the performance in a certain way and I get that vibe, that connection, then we can go wherever we want and you'll follow me and you'll be happy to be surprised. You know, and it's a lot about, I mean, geez, I don't want to talk about magic again because I don't know magic, but it's like a lot of magic depends on you understanding what's happening. If I'm like, okay, take a card, cut the cards, flip it over, now I ripped it in half, and now it's over here and over there. Here's your card. And if you don't follow that procedure, you're not shocked. You're just lost. You know, you're just like, okay, I guess something happened. Like I don't feel it didn't really. I don't get it because you got lost. So it's a little bit same in. It's easier to talk about with magic because magic is a little bit more linear. Shuffle the cards. Okay, now they're mixed up. Pick a card. Now I can't see it. Like there's all these little markers that are concrete. Whereas with juggling, it's so much harder to be like, now I do the 5 balls, and then I go to do the clubs. Like it's harder to quantify what effect those things have on you consciously or like intentionally. But yeah, if you design the performance in the right way, then you build this journey where it's like a mystery of where it's going, but like you're really happy to be in the mystery as opposed to being sad that you're lost. And then maybe another thing to say is like Ivar Heckscher, my mentor, the old director of the Circus University in Stockholm, he always said that like juggling somehow maybe teaches humans how to interact with objects on this planet, on the Earth or whatever. Where it's like I experience this a lot with juggling when I watch juggling, either people just practicing for fun or in a performance or whatever. When I just see any sort of juggling, oftentimes I'll be like you were talking about, where it's like there's that shape and you don't know how I'm going to interact with it or how it's going to behave. And then I'll see that in another juggling pattern or something, and I'll go like, oh, that's what happens when you use that shape in that way and that rhythm with that throw. Like I didn't know the human body did that exactly, or I didn't know that gravity worked in that way with physics, with the, you know, the gravity of the blah, blah, blah. Like, so I think we do learn a lot intuitively. It's just so hard to articulate it like concretely, but there's so much like intuitive learning when you see a juggler interact with objects. If you can get past looking at the skill, because like a lot of normal people, like the general public, they'll look at the juggling and just be like, wow, that was hard to do. And they kind of zoom out and they glaze over their eyes and they're not focusing on details. If you can get past the skill and don't care about the skill as the first priority, I think you can start to zoom in on the details and learn a lot about like how the human body works, with moving through space and with the object. That is juggling, right? You have the object, body, and then the environment and time. I mean, those are your elements. So in any of those areas, if you can kind of like learn things in those areas or experience like emotional resonance in those areas.
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to touch on. You also, if I remember correctly, mentioned in the Magic podcast, I forgot the name, my apologies, that you think that juggling is not in a stage where we can start to like interpret already existing art pieces in a juggling framework. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm imagining something like, say, Swan Lake, like a ballet with music. But I think it would be possible to express a story like Swan Lake with jugglers. You know, there are scenes like the ballroom scenes where people are dancing together, but then they could be passing, right? Then they stop passing. Now you're already expressing that there is some disconnect between the performers and so on. And I think it would be very much possible to take some of, for example, ballet. I think it's the most obvious example, to take ballet and interpret it as a juggling piece.
So I don't want to get stuck on language with you. Like, I think there's two problems potentially. And and at the end of the day, the two problems could come down to just like how we start to define words, which is like a boring conversation. But like, let's take Swan Lake. It's a good example. I think you have two challenges to solve, potentially. And I'm absolutely not saying that you're wrong. To be fair, like, look, we were talking about juggling culture. We should try to do it. Like, nobody's tried to do Swan Lake with juggling that I know of. Like, we should try it. Like, this is all just guessing until we try it. But I think there's two challenges to solve. The first one is, when I said, at least on the Magic podcast with Adam Rubin was interviewing me, I think I can imagine what you're saying with Swan Lake. But the juggling itself is not expressing Swan Lake. The set design, the music, the costuming, the acting, like all the stagecraft is signaling Swan Lake. If you would remove the score of Swan Lake, if you would remove the title of Swan Lake, if you would remove the everything and just do the juggling passing in that scene, nobody's going to think Swan Lake. I mean, without context, I think. It's just a hypothesis, right? You could even call it Swan Lake. Let's say you could even call the show Swan Lake, but it's people all dressed in black. There's no music. There's no acting. There's no facial expressions. You're just doing this club passing sequence. Nobody's going to follow Swan Lake, I think, at this point, because juggling is abstract. I think that's one problem we have. We can talk about in a second. The second challenge is cultural. In our society, in everybody's society, but we all have different societies where we grow up in different parts of the world. I can only talk about mine. That was my experience. In my world where I grew up in, and I think it's the same for you probably in some ways, you have an innate born cultural relationship to opera, to ballet, to dance, to music, to storytelling, poetry, juggling. They are maybe not all very developed or deep, or you might not even know that you have it at all. I didn't know what dance was until I was 18. What I mean by that is it didn't become conscious in me until I was 18. Of course I knew what dance was culturally. Like when I was a kid, someone said the word dance, like, you know, you learn language, like here's an apple, here's a cup. Like at some point somebody taught me the word dance, and like I knew something about dance. I never thought about dance. I'd never seen contemporary dance. Like I never saw ballet. Of course I knew it existed. I didn't have a very deep relationship with it at all, but I had a relationship with it culturally, to that word and that activity too, when I would see a glimpse of it or something on TV. And it's the same thing for juggling. Everybody where I grew up had some sort of vision of juggling. It was a word that people knew. If I would say juggling to someone, they wouldn't say, huh? They'd be like, oh, juggling. But they wouldn't know what it was. They wouldn't know what I did. They wouldn't know anything. But they knew the word and they knew the activity in the broad cultural sense. Same way, like in America, when I grew up, if you said the word circus, they think Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's with elephants, and like they have a cultural image of it, right? Even though when I was growing up, it was like Cirque du Soleil was on its rise, doing no animals and blah, blah, blah. So people have a relationship to things culturally. Then if you try to do Swan Lake with juggling, it's a pretty tough ask to overcome people's innate cultural relationship to juggling, unless you change that conversation. that's been the focus of my performing work for the past 6 years, working with Captain Frodo as a director and scriptwriter. And so then like 6 years ago with Captain Frodo, it was like, okay, I'm going to finally like confront this idea that I think juggling is art, but the general public doesn't. They just don't. It's the same thing in America. Even today, I think if you say circus, lots of people still think elephants. I used to think when I was younger, I thought that was wrong. Well, you're wrong. It's not elephants. But 2 years ago, I realized, hold on, it's not right or wrong. It's just the starting point of the conversation. So if I say juggling, people have a certain connotation. They have a certain image of that. If you go see Swan Lake without confronting that context, it's going to be weird. You're not going to alienate people, but they're going to be confused because juggling doesn't go with ballet. That's not a thing that's innate from what we're born with. And it's going to stick out. I think, let's be real, there's the Philip Glass opera right now with Gandini juggling in the Achnactum.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that.
First of all, on a cultural business level, like, oh my God, that is so cool. Are you kidding me? They're juggling in a Philip Glass opera, like in New York and LA and London. Like, that's freaking crazy. From a business kind of cultural visibility standpoint, that's insane. From an artistic standpoint, I haven't seen it live. I saw it on video, and there's a couple things I can say. Again, all respect to the performers and to the fact that they got juggling there. Mm-hmm. But it's more the designers and the directors of the show, where it's like juggling is kind of in one way it's still used as a party trick, like somehow. Maybe better than some other shows where they kind of gratuitously stick circus in there just to have like the little special moment. And this is nothing about Gandini or Philip Glass or the juggling. When you look at like the Philip Glass opera, it's like the set design, it's like the most refined, perfect set design ever. The music is like the top of the class world singing or whatever. Everything is kind of like, because there's money. This is not a fault of juggling. This is a fault of like the world of like that we live in. There's money for opera, right? Like there's money to develop those things. And then we're going to put jugglers in there, and jugglers don't have those same resources. And it's like, if you want to match the spectacle and grandeur and like respect of the opera, whatever, which personally I don't, but like if you're going to put juggling in that context, then you would pay a troupe of jugglers for like 10 years to just like lift weights and like work out and be like super buff, and like then you're in your spandex costume and you're all going to juggle 9 balls for 100 catches in the background, right? Like to be superlative in the way the opera is. So we have like a cultural disconnect is what I'm trying to get at. So in your Swan Lake example, I'm not sure if people could overcome the strangeness of seeing the club passing in that Swan Lake scene, then maybe we would have some conversation about it. But I'm not sure you can do that without some sort of preparation. And even then, we're still stuck with this abstract activity. The reason Swan Lake works, the reason musicals work, is because they are culturally embedded in us. There's nothing maybe intrinsically different between dancing and juggling. Like in juggling, you're throwing and catching things, it's abstract. And in dancing, I'm waving my arm around, like in ballet, like, it's also abstract. The difference is that we've been conditioned as human beings in our culture that one thing has meaning and one thing doesn't. Like Swan Lake is like a cultural format, and people know the name and they know the music. And yeah, I don't know. That was some thoughts on that.
I would love to see it one day, someone to attempt it, because I think we would also, if nothing else, we would learn something from it. Like, what can juggling actually express? Because now we can have a lot of thoughts on, would it work? Would the public like grasp it? Would it even sell tickets on like a more commercial level, to put it in those words? But we just don't know. And I've also gone to see Swan Lake, like new interpretation of Swan Lake with more like a contemporary dance, modern dance style elements mixed in with the ballet. And it was still a full concert hall, like with a live orchestra and everything, like a big production.
There's a show in Sweden by a children's dance company called Claire Parsons, and one of my best students and friends, Victor Gyllenberg, he's working in that company, and he juggles kind of in every show. He's a dancer and a juggler, and they have a show called Little Swan Lake. So it's like literally Swan Lake for kids, and then he's juggling a lot in that show. Again, the whole expression of Swan Lake is through the format of the show and the set and the idea of Swan Lake, that's a cultural phenomenon. And I'm not saying that the juggling in that show isn't expressive or that it's useless at all. It's very cool. Juggling itself, like the technique itself, I'm not sure that it's really expressing anything about Swan Lake. Even in the moments when he juggles, I think if it's expressing something more than skill and difficulty for the kids, I don't think it's expressing Swan Lake. But I don't know. Like, I should ask him what his intention is behind the sequence. I'm pretty sure his ring sequence is not based upon some sort of Swan Lake algorithm, but I'm going to ask him.
So thank you, Jay. It's been really, really interesting conversations here. There have been so many good topics, so many interesting perspectives and anything. Where are you headed in the future? What are some of the projects that you are currently working on?
Working on a new show with Kyle Driggs. He lives in New York. One of my best friends from years now. We used to tour Iceland every summer. And that show is something about juggling with light. Not obviously, you can't physically juggle light itself. Like, I can't touch light, but it's some idea about juggling and visuals and light design and juggling with light or something. Obviously, it's a new project, and I should refine the language around it, or at least have a concise artistic statement. Not necessarily to tell you, but to tell myself. So maybe that's a future task, to start to kind of round up and like more formalize those ideas. But we're going to do the premiere of that show later this year. And then there's a new show, a new project just started with Eric Oberry, and we're going to do a 10-person juggling show. We're going to try to make a juggling show with 10 people. We start work on that in November coming up. So those are like the two big creative projects that are coming up. And then this will never happen because it's been trying to happen for years, or like a few years now, but I should write a book if I ever have time. I don't know if I'll ever have time to write my book, but I've been collecting notes for a book for a few years. I think juggling should have more books, or it should just have more everything. Okay. So books is one of the things I'd love to see, more juggling books, and maybe more juggling books that aren't just like instructional learn to juggle books, but maybe more philosophical or something. So I was thinking like, well, what should I make a book about? And at first it was like, oh, I should make a book about juggling, like all of it. And then that's impossible, or it's like too big of a task for me, too intimidating. So then I thought maybe the book is going to be something about how to perform juggling. I think that's the topic of the book, would be how to perform juggling. So I've been collecting conversations and ideas for that for a couple of years. If I would ever have time to sit down and write it, would be cool. And then I'm also editing a book right now for Captain Frodo. Captain Frodo wrote a book about his philosophy of performing. And so I'm editing that book, and that's really good practice. Actually, I intentionally did that because it's good practice to write my own book, to learn how to write a book. Even though I have a book out called 5 Catches, but that was like a collection of essays that was published in Juggle magazine back in the day. But now I want to write like a deeper book. And so I think that's all the projects. A couple of new shows, like really big projects coming out, and then maybe some writing projects. Let's see. I'm also working on a new live music set. I started performing as a musician since COVID, doing some concerts here and there. I have like a new live set kind of half finished, which I should also get done at some point in all my free time somehow. Let's see.
Where can our listeners and viewers follow you on your journey?
So you can go to my YouTube channel, which I totally ruined by throwing all my videos on there. I still have like, I don't know, a few terabytes of videos I need to upload. I'm currently digitizing 600 VHS tapes to throw on my YouTube channel at some point from like back in the day when I started juggling. That's a crazy project. But yeah, YouTube channel's there. Most of my like a lot of my old shows are there. You should listen to Captain Frodo's podcast, The Way of the Showman. And I'm on a lot of those episodes, and I can highly recommend Frodo's podcast, The Way of the Showman. It's a great listen for everybody.
Yeah, also I can definitely recommend
so
to check out Jay's Instagram channel, where there's usually quite a lot of interesting stuff and ideas being shared, at least in my opinion. And if any of our listeners and viewers haven't listened to Object episodes, I cannot recommend it enough. It's in my favorite podcast ever, and I hope to one day see it continue. Still waiting for that notification bell when an episode might finally release.
We have notes we have notes for season 4, but I'm a father. Eric's a father. He has 3 little girls between the ages of like 6 and 10. and I have a 10-year-old boy, and so between touring and being parents and everything else, we haven't had time to sit down and record season 4. And it's also maybe partly the format. It's like we sit down and we press record and we don't stop talking until the season is done. So maybe we for a moment we tried to like record an episode like one at a time for a new season, but it just doesn't work with our format. So we have to hope that we find like 2 free days just to like not do anything else and just press record and talk for 2 days straight, and then I can edit it to the season. But so it'll be a miracle if it happens. But thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jay. We cannot thank you enough for being on this podcast. This has been really great experience to have you on here. This has been the Poiheads podcast. Music is done by Flavio. Thank you all for checking in. If any of you have any notes, questions, anything, feel free to send us an email and contact@poiheads.com. And also feel free to check out our merch shop on poiheads.com. Thank you all for listening, and ciao.
Thank you guys.
Ciao.